to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2015. Getting into the week here. We've got oodles to talk about today. Phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, hand hovering over the telephone, waiting to swoop on down, put you on the air with your comments and questions. All right, the situation over in Ukraine is dynamic, I think is a good way to put it here. We are hearing that the participants in the Minsk agreement, or the Minsk agreement, are still out there saying, yes, we need to move forward with this situation, even though the ceasefire that was called for so far has not really materialized. And it's kind of interesting. I'm looking at this story over in Russia Today, where it says the leaders of Russia, Germany, and Ukraine have discussed the progress in implementing the Ukraine ceasefire deal amid an ongoing dispute over Kiev's besieged military force in Debaltsevo. See, that's the real issue. If there's a ceasefire, those trapped troops get to go home to Kiev. From the tactical point of view, that is something the eastern Ukrainian republics don't want to do. They have gone to a great deal of trouble to encircle and trap this force, and they don't want to just turn around and let them go, give them a chance to regroup. And it's all well and good for these leaders of Germany and France and Kiev and even Putin to get together and agree on a course of action, and quite another to get everybody to go along with it. Now, the eastern Ukrainian republics were not invited to participate in the negotiations in Minsk, and they're not feeling that they're under any obligation to go along with that. And even Poroshenko is having trouble controlling his own government and right now. His own hard right sector has vowed to continue the fighting. And if the reports that we got yesterday are accurate, Poroshenko has been handed an ultimatum by his own military to shut this war down in 1 week or face being removed. Now, after an entire year trying to bring back the eastern Ukrainian republics into the slave pens, it's obvious Poroshenko's not going to be able to get this done in a week. The eastern Ukrainian republics know this. They don't have to prevail against Kiev. They just have to survive. And that gives them an advantage. Plus, these are people who are fighting for their own homes, businesses, families, friends, loved ones they see with their eyes against a force of conscripts who don't even want to be there to begin with. And that also works to the favor of the eastern Ukrainian republics. Now, Russia has taken a resolution to the United Nations Security Council to implement the Minsk agreement, and it actually passed unanimously, but of course, you know, how would the U.S. and U.K. justify vetoing something that very clearly is working toward a resolution of the crisis? Meanwhile, over in Debaltsevo, it is still going hot and heavy on the streets of the town. The eastern Ukrainian republics are claiming they're in control of most of the strategic city. It's a transportation hub. Very important logistically to that part of the country. I think I read somewhere that something like only 15% of the original population is still remaining inside that city because of the severity of the fighting. Now, we're looking at this interesting story coming out of Eric Margolis. Putin heads off a U.S.-Russia war. Well, maybe, maybe not. But the story is worth reading because it once again reminds us all of how the U.S. was claiming Saddam had nuclear weapons of mass destruction, Assad had sarin gas, all these other lies used to start a war, and a reminder that all of this bovine excrement that we're hearing coming out of the State Department from the American corporate media saying that this is all Russia's fault, it's just more of the same. It is just more of the same USDA choice bovine excrement, and they brought out the bovine excrement howitzer to try and fling it at us. Apparently, Russia Today had a news crew at the Donetsk airport. They came under fire. It's a very, very dangerous place to be right now. On a somewhat lighter side, there was a BBC reporter who was doing a story about how the rebels had broken the ceasefire, and he almost gets killed by an artillery shell coming in from Kiev. So they're out there still pushing the lies, even though the background imagery tells you what's really going on. And look at all the lies that have been going on so far. Oh, we got pictures of tanks. We got pictures of this. We got pictures of that. None of it ever materialized. All of it was exposed. Now, interesting development. The Russian Federal Security Service in Crimea has discovered and confiscated caches of weapons being smuggled in by the right sector Ukrainian ultranationalist movement to try and organize mass riots in Crimea as an excuse to take Crimea back from Russia. But they apparently found that. I'm sure they're tracking down just who was so generous giving them those weapons. Interesting article out of Investment Watch blog. Polls are showing most Europeans continue to support Russia despite the massive propaganda campaign. U.S. and EU authorities claim that Russia has been isolated economically. That, too, of course, is nonsense. All these sanctions have done, besides harm the Western economies, is accelerate the process of Russia, China, India, South Africa, and all these other countries to form their own economic trade systems operating outside Western dominance. It's backfired horribly. Now, we are continuing to get stories from inside Russia and Ukraine, confirming once again that President Poroshenko and members of the parliament and top deputies have all sent their families out of Ukraine, either concerned about a full-on war with Russia or the possibility of being forcibly ousted from the government. We have been hearing for weeks and weeks about the possibility of a military coup. Yesterday we heard there was actually an ultimatum delivered by the Ukrainian military to Poroshenko to just shut this thing down in a week. We know certainly that the Western Ukrainians are not at all happy with what's gone on in their country for the last year. Now, over at Future Trends Cast, there's another story that again confirms that the top leaders of Ukraine have gotten their families out of the way, but it includes an allegation that the U.S. is planning a massive false flag attack in the Debaltsevo region, possibly even involving a nuclear detonation to be blamed on Russia. And again, common sense. Look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a reason for Russia to launch a single nuke or a single artillery shell into Ukraine, knowing that war with Europe and the United States is the inevitable result. If Putin decides he's got to come across that border, it will be everything he's got, and he'll be in Kiev 48 hours later. Now, while the American media is slapping Brian Williams around for lying about being shot down, apparently the German federal television channel ZDF has been called to account after a citizens' media monitoring group caught them in false reporting, again, the presence of Russian tanks in eastern Ukraine. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. By the way, we're still waiting for an apology from Jim Imhoff for claiming he had photos of Russian tanks in Ukraine, and the photos turned out to be from 2008 and were taken down in Georgia. They're absolutely unrepentant liars. That lie didn't work. Let's try another one. Here we go. Maybe they'll believe this. Maybe they'll believe that. It's like the old Maxwell Smart TV show. Would you believe? No, I wouldn't believe that. Well, would you believe that? It didn't work. Alrighty, looking on down to Syria, the Syrian government army apparently is gaining ground north of Aleppo. Assad, if he can crack down and push out this covert overthrow, it yanks the rug out from under the United States, saying we have to invade Syria because of ISIS, because so far most of what the U.S. has been bombing inside Syria has nothing to do with ISIS and everything to do with Syria's economy. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the situation regarding ISIS, which at this point, it's another made-up enemy that the U.S. plops into a designated invasion target. The controversy over Obama's authorization for the use of military force, like he's not already doing it, continues, with the Democrats saying it's too open-ended, there's no clear objective, there's no clear definitions, and the GOP saying it doesn't go anywhere near far enough. And apparently, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah has called the current version of the AUMF utterly stupid. It doesn't include troops on the ground and limits the war to only 3 years. Well, Mr. Hatch, I'd like to remind you, Obama is only in that Oval Office for another 2 years. A little less than that. So that third year is kind of dangling out there. We have, let's see, Dr. Ben Carson, also a Republican and considering a run in 2016, says it's time to crush the Islamic State while they're still in their adolescent stage, saying he would use every resource available. See, that's the excuse for the U.S. to go on out and complete its conquest of the world. Oh, ISIS is out there. Yes, this country hasn't done anything wrong to us, but ISIS is there. They're beheading people. They're setting them on fire. They're executing, they're doing all these horrific things which are designed to provoke an anger response, which is how we know it's all propaganda. ISIS is 200 guys in a video production unit. Now, over in Arkansas, State Senator Jason Rappert on his Facebook page said, let's just go ahead and nuke the countries where ISIS is located. Just get it over with. Okay, Jason, here's your rifle. Anyway. Now, there's a slightly different take coming out of the State Department. State Department spokesperson Marie Harf, being interviewed by Chris Matthews, said that ISIS, we don't need to kill them, we just need to make sure there's an economy that gives them jobs. Which is an amazing amount of common sense coming out of the State Department. Nobody just wakes up one day and says, there's nothing on TV, I think I'll become a terrorist. Somebody gets to that stage because they don't have a job, they don't have money, they're watching their families starve to death, or worse, get blown to bloody bits by drone strikes. If the money junkies would just let go a little bit, so that ordinary people around the world in every single country are able to transform their labor into a decent living for themselves and their loved ones, would all go away. All this problem would go away. But the money junkies are addicted to other people's wealth, and they're warring with each other to see which brand of ink and paper gets used, which one of them gets the biggest pile of debt that's owed to them. They don't even think like human beings anymore. To them, the planet Earth is this gigantic game board. And they're playing the game, and millions are dying, and they don't care because that's just human capital, and that's just to be spent to score points in the grand game of world domination, or world plundering, as the case may be. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. We're going to go to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Hey, I thought ISIS already had a job.
Yeah, you're right. They're working for the United States government. Same as Al-Qaeda. Remember, ISIS is the new version of Al-Qaeda because too many people figured out Al-Qaeda was a propaganda fake. We had all these guys.
Al-Qaeda was only part-time, though.
No, actually, Adam Gadon, also known as Adam Perlman, that was his full-time job. But too many people began to realize it was just a fake, made-up enemy by the U.S. government. And so they tried to resurrect the Muslim Brotherhood as the enemy we were all supposed to hate, and they weren't cooperating. So if you need an enemy that is going to do what you need them to do to arouse the anger of the American people, you create them yourself, and that's what the United States has done. That's what ISIS, ISIL, ICE, whatever they want to, they can't even decide on what name they're going to call it. But they're trying to basically create a new holy crusade of all the world's Christians against all the world's Muslims. And, of course, Israel's off to one side laughing their head off at how stupid we all are to fall for it again.
Hey, Mike, is that significant, like that some people call it ISIS and some people call it ISIL? Do you think that there's a meaning there somehow?
I think they started out calling it ISIS, and then too many people were equating it to its religious significance in Egyptian lore, and they just decided we got to rebrand and rename. But it's all propaganda. They're all made up. I mean, we've got the guy in the beheading video speaks with a British accent. Some of these videos are very clearly manufactured fakes coming out of Site Intelligence Group. And, every day ISIS has committed some new atrocity that should anger us to fling our babies onto somebody else's country. It's a fake. They couldn't get Iraq to do anything that would allow the U.S. to invade a third time. They couldn't get Libya to do anything that would allow the U.S. To invade a second time. And so now they've made up this enemy, and wherever the U.S. wants to go, they're just going to plop ISIS in there. And yesterday, Fox News was running the story about all the countries that are compromised by ISIS, and it was a world map. And they had red over any country where ISIS was known to be, which coincidentally happen to be countries with a lot of natural resources that are currently not being traded in the U.S. dollar.
I wonder if Brian Williams was in the convoy with ISIS when they're in a Toyota truck.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Somebody said...
Hey, Mike,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. On a serious note, I want to talk about Putin in Hungary. Did you mention that yet?
No, not yet. I think I've got it a little bit further down here.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that he's, making deals like with Egypt and plans on new nuclear reactors in Hungary.
That's it. That's the difference between the United States and Russia. Russia's making deals, peace through commerce, and the U.S. is just making war on everybody who refuses to just ship their wealth over here, no questions asked.
But I think they know the Ukrainian army is defeated. So I don't know if you talked about this, about Poland training Lithuanian and Latvia and Polish because they can't directly sell weapons to the Ukraine, so they can train these people to fight in the Ukraine with weapons that NATO gives them.
Yeah, but under the Minsk agreement, they all have to be pulled out. All of those foreign fighters have to be pulled out. I don't think Poroshenko's actually going to do it, but that's the requirement.
Yeah, because in that how do you say it? Despotiva?
Yeah.
They're basically defeated there. There's just no way out of that area if you look on the map. They're just definitely surrounded, and that's going to be a killing field.
Yeah, well, it already is. It already is. And again, the advantage is to the eastern Ukrainians because they're fighting for their homes and loved ones against an army of conscripts that don't want to be there in the first place. And the advantage goes to the eastern Ukrainians. There's a wonderful line out of the Captain America movie. Wars are fought with weapons, but they're won by people. And that is one of the best parts of writing that entire script. All right?
Thanks, Mike.
All right, Dustin, we got to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We got another caller waiting on the line. We're going to get to it as soon as we're back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and the phone lines are loading up here. Before we get to it, I want to get this one last story in here. Over in Egypt, newly installed puppet ruler, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, is now calling for the United Nations to pass a resolution allowing international forces to intervene in Libya. Did I not tell you this was going to happen? When the people of Libya kicked out their U.S. puppet rulers, there had to be a second invasion of Libya to put that province back in its place, and ISIS is just the excuse. And al-Sisi he's the cutout to push forward the U.S. agenda, because by golly, we can't let those provinces break away from the Roman Empire. It sets a bad example. And Fox News just ran a story insisting that ISIS is now in all three major regions of Libya. We have to conquer the entire country now. They really are very obvious once you figure out what's going on behind the scenes here. All right, we're going to have ourselves a phone call. Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How you doing?
Doing good.
I got to tell you a little story, then I'll ask a question if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'll be brief. We had a friend of ours over the other night she's in her 60s. I won't obviously mention her name. Very nice looking woman. She hasn't been married for 20 years. We were having a discussion on terrorists, and I said, you really think I went to your description. What do you think? There's terrorists under your bed? I said, is that what you think? She goes, would he be cute?
Okay, I like that. I like that.
I said, what are you talking about? Would he be cute? She goes, I haven't had any action for 15 years.
Okay. I like her already. Don't know who she is, but I like her already with a sense of humor like that.
She's funny. She's very funny. But anyways, I thought that was funny. I thought you'd like that. But anyways, my question to you is this. I've listened to your show for almost 2 years now, a year and a half maybe, and I love your show. Who do you think, I know you think the Rothschild bankers are behind everything, or at least I think you do. And if that's the case, which a lot of people kind of come to, you know, the trillions and how long they've been in business, do you think they sit around like a dozen guys, you know, and really discuss like, well, let's bomb Ukraine or let's do this or do that, or do you think this is more of just happenstance? You know,
well,
with a few people in charge, but nobody really, there's no Wizard of Oz. I'll shut up and listen to your answer.
No, I would go with that latter one. I mean, the private central banks' imposition of debt on everybody is the driving force. And the Rothschilds really don't care who is attacking who. Bankers love war. They make money off of both sides. So they don't really care, you know, who's fighting who or who even wins or loses, as long as they can sort of kick up the chaos and make money off of it. I don't think they sit around, you know, with the grand chessboard, although obviously these meetings like the Bilderbergers and the rest of it, a lot of policy gets set. But it really is an epiphenomenon of the basic operating principle of a private central bank, which is capture control of a nation's currency and then issue all that currency as a loan at interest to trap the nation and its people in permanent unpayable debt in order to rule them. And that's what they've been doing for 300 years. They're very good at it. They're very ruthless at maintaining their power and wealth. But I think as far as the fine details as to who is invading who, I think that may actually be beneath their notice for the most part.
You know, Michael, you said something earlier in your broadcast, and I'm not one of these alien space. I mean, it could be. I don't know. I have no clue. But the way you were describing the ruling elite was how people on the internet and few people I know describe. They think aliens are really in charge, including Queen Elizabeth, and you were describing exactly what they say. Exactly. You don't believe that, right?
Oh no, I think any space aliens passing by this planet are going to look down and say, not worth the trouble. We're out of here. But you know, you're dealing with people who are multi-generational, incredibly wealthy, and just by virtue of their upbringing, they've been raised to think a certain way about how the wealth is supposed to flow to them. That's what the imaginary playmate in the sky that they pray to tells them, or they're being told on their behalf. Like the ruling families of any nation, they are basically raised to be oblivious to the suffering and hardship what they do causes, because that just gets in the way of empire building.
But you can't rule out the way out there, or whatever you want to call it, fact that maybe we were seated this way. Maybe the aliens seated it this way.
That is way out there, and that is not a topic for this show. I suggest you call into Jeff Rentz. He'll give you a much better ear than I will on that. Okay?
I love you. I love you, Mike. You and Claire. I love you guys.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here, and before we take the next phone call, I want to clarify my position on this. I'm absolutely convinced the universe is filled with life, and a lot of it is intelligent civilizations. And on the assumption that somebody out there figures a way around that speed of light limit, I can't really imagine how a civilization that far advanced would find anything of interest on this planet. Science fiction likes to portray us as we are today, but with warp drive and phasers and Death Stars and the rest of it. That's not the way it works. Technology and civilizations evolve together, I hope. And any civilization that's achieved faster than light interplanetary travel, there's nothing here to hold their curiosity. When you drive down the highway in your brand new car, do you stop and visit every anthill that you pass? No, you don't. You don't care about them. They're beneath your notice. And I think the same thing is going to be true in the universe. So, yeah, I'm sure they're out there. No, I don't think they visit us. No reason for them to. Okay, we're going to take another phone call here. We're going to go to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yeah, I've been looking back at history. You know, the U.S. tried to invade Cuba in the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
And ever since then, for the last 60-odd years, they've been trying to invade or trying to cripple the country. And this is just malice. They did the same in Libya. Now they're trying to get back in again. They've done the same in Iraq, and they're invading for the third time.
It's institutional spite.
I'm sure it is, and it's just costing the American people an awful lot of money and an awful lot of prestige. The amount of almost hatred going around the world of the U.S. is growing massively because of this nonsense that's going on.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And like I said, 50 years from now, I'm afraid that the world will look on the Stars and Stripes with the same revulsion that our generation was taught to look on the swastika.
Well, there's another thing. I've been investigating Hitler, and he wasn't half as bad as everybody claims he was. Most of it is propaganda nonsense, just like the propaganda nonsense we're getting about Putin now. I mean, I'm sure these allegations against Putin will go down in the history books, but it'll be mostly nonsense and rubbish.
It is, but the difference is, today in the 21st century, in the age of the Internet, the general public is now aware of the degree to which they are propagandized and lied to by their government and media. And this stuff only works when the population doesn't know they're being lied to, when they're not suspicious, when they're not skeptical. When the people become skeptical, when they lose that trust in government and the corporate media, propaganda just doesn't work anymore. And we're seeing them thrash around trying to come up with something. Oh, Russia's doing this, Russia's doing that, China's doing that, China's doing that. And they're getting basically a big yawn from the vast majority of the American people.
Well, I think the money junkies, the bankers and the money junkies, these huge corporate interests, are looking at Greece and thinking, oh dear, this might change things.
It very well might. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, John, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm not the only person out there saying that this is all a gigantic hoax. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all of that stuff. It is nonsense. Now, Chinese state news has come on out and said the United States is not an anti-terror leader. They are terrorist breeders. They create these enemies as instruments of covert foreign policy. And it's been confirmed time and time again. Remember, early on, the U.S. was dropping weapons and supplies to ISIS in Syria. Oh, it was a mistake. We thought they were our guys. So forth and so on. The president of Sudan has come out stating that, in his opinion, CIA and Mossad are behind not only ISIS but Boko Haram. Oh, there's a terrorist threat in Africa. We have to conquer Africa and get rid of the terrorists, and at the same time make sure that all those natural resources in Africa are traded for the U.S. dollar. That is what is driving the current U.S. pattern of aggression. Trying to conquer the world and bring them back under domination of the U.S. dollar. Because the American money junkies got lazy. They made so much money off Bretton Woods and the petrodollar, they just didn't think they had to dirty their hands with this let's make an actual product stuff. And as a result, American manufacturing has declined both in quality and quantity, certainly not in price. And nobody wants our agriculture because of the disastrous experiment with GMO. When the world collectively drops the dollar, it is over. It's all going to come crashing down. There is no stopping it. And supporting this whole idea is a very interesting article coming out of Global Research that's sort of doing a flashback to the 2001 terrorist attacks in Macedonia, which were Islamic fighters, those radical Islamic type people, and basically pointed out all the evidence that the U.S. sponsored this. Remember, Al-Qaeda was originally created out of the Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan that were recruited, trained, supplied by the United States government covertly, Charlie Wilson's war, against the Soviet Union. And we know now that the consulate in Benghazi was running guns from Libya to the Syrian rebels, who were supposed to be Al-Qaeda, our horrible, horrible enemies. Now, up in Copenhagen, they're still trying to maximize this last weekend's terror attack. And the Danish authorities are acknowledging that the shooter, the identified shooter, was known to them, had a past record of gang activity, had a criminal record. Doesn't sound like a very convincing Muslim to me, I might add. And they knew all about him, and still this event happened, which tells us one of two things. Either they let it happen or caused it to happen for its propaganda value, or all this NSA spying all over the world doesn't work. Take your pick. There is no other explanation here. Now, of course, as soon as the Copenhagen situation unfolded, Benjamin Netanyahu basically reprised the speech he made after the Charlie Hebdo attack, reminding the Jews of Europe, you are not safe here, anti-Semitism is on the rise, they're targeting you, they hate you, you should move to Israel and work for low wages on the farms we're taking from the Palestinians. Well, remember a few years ago where Israel tried to lure the Iranian Jews to Israel with huge financial incentives. And the Iranian Jews said, I don't think so. We're happy here. Nobody's abusing us. We're not persecuted. We're not discriminated against. We've got good lives here. Thank you very much. Well, apparently the Jews in Denmark have said exactly the same thing. They're not feeling very strong attraction to Israel. They're very happy in Denmark. They've got nice homes, nice lives. And they're not feeling that they're targeted and persecuted despite all the propaganda in the media. And we know that much of that propaganda is manufactured. Remember that story from last week? Somebody painted the word Jew on 20 cars in France. Oh, proof of anti-Semitism. Then they arrested the guy, and it turned out he was a 73-year-old Jewish man himself, trying to build sympathy for the poor Jewish victims and stuff. Then, of course, yesterday we were reporting on the desecration of 300 Jewish graves in France, and today the police have announced they arrested 5 teenagers for doing this. And here's where it gets interesting in this story. Okay. The authorities are saying there was no anti-Semitic motive. They don't know what the motives of these adolescents are. They don't have past criminal records. And they don't seem to have any ideological convictions that would explain their behavior. Which tells me these kids are probably Jewish, and the media doesn't want to admit it this quickly after arresting the other guy for spray painting the cars. But we know that hate crime hoaxes are a reality of the political landscape. The Tawana Brawley rape hoax. Lives were ruined with that. Professor out at Claremont College in California was caught spray painting swastikas on her own car. Lady student at Georgetown was screaming about how anti-Semites were spraying swastikas on her dorm room door when she was away. So the university put in a security camera. Guess who they caught putting the swastika on the door? These are not isolated, rare instances. This is a constant pattern of propaganda. Oh, the anti-Semites are there. We need special protection. We need special money. We need special rights. And we have to have the right to throw anybody who doubts Israel's version of history in prison. Which, by the way, apparently in Italy, they're close to achieving. The Italian Senate has just passed a law against Holocaust denial or Holocaust questioning. Truth needs no law to defend it. Truth survives re-examination. Truth welcomes questions. Throughout history, from Galileo to Zundel, only lies and liars resort to courts of law to enforce adherence to dogma. Story out of Raw Story. America's most prominent Muslim says the Atlantic is doing PR for ISIS. And their complaint is that this group of Muslims in the United States did a very thoughtful, well-written essay pointing out about the behavior of ISIS in the media is inconsistent with the teachings of Islam. And saying, we don't know who these guys are, but they're not Muslim. They don't behave like Muslims. They're not following the traditions or the observations. Remember back on 9/11? Oh, the gosh darn Muslims were behind 9/11. And then they found out the top named suspect, Mohammed Atta, was dating strippers, doing alcohol, doing drugs, hanging out on Jack Abramoff's yacht before it all went down. So apparently, the Atlantic came out with a counter-article saying, oh, absolutely, we have read the Koran, and everything that the ISIS people are doing is in the Koran. And these Muslims have hit an important point. Everything ISIS is doing in these videos is not what is inside Islam. And I know we have a lot of Christians who behave the same way, the witch burnings during the Middle Ages and the Holy Crusades and everything. But I think we all agree that Christians who do that aren't really very Christian when they behave that way. Remember when they raided that house in Abbottabad and claimed that they'd gotten Osama bin Laden, and then they tried to demonize him post-mortem by saying, oh, we found all kinds of porn all over the place. Well, it's a sin under Islam to look at naked women, not your wife. So whoever it was they killed in that house wasn't Muslim. But they're trying to sell you a new holy crusade. Talk about falling back into the Dark Ages. We're there. We need a war between the Christians and the Muslims. Grab your sword and your Templar shield and go forth. We'll be back after our news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Now, getting on down to Israel, the fur is still flying over Benjamin Netanyahu's scheduled speech to a joint session of Congress, currently set for March the 3rd. And it has caused a tremendous amount of friction, not only with the White House, but even within Israel's support structure inside the United States, who realized that such a blatant display of Israel's control over the Congress is not going to sit well with the American voters or donors. Now, Israel's ambassador is out there saying that Netanyahu's address to Congress about why we've got to go kill Iran is worth the price of a little friction with Obama. He's only going to be there 2 more years anyway. We don't need him. Arrogance will be their undoing. And as surprising as it may sound to a lot of you listening to this show, I side with Obama on this issue. Boehner was wrong. Boehner is in violation of the Logan Act. I'm waiting to see him in a bright orange prison jumpsuit and handcuffs over this. Now, as one of our callers into the show last hour mentioned, Putin is visiting Hungary for a meeting with Viktor Orban to talk about energy issues, possible reactor, and basically is eroding the encirclement plan by the U.S. and NATO against Russia. Russia's making deals while the U.S. tries to make war. We all know where this is going. In fact, there's an interesting article in Investment Watch blog. Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt line up with Putin, sensing the West's wane. They all know what's going on, what's going to happen, how close the U.S. economic system is to collapse. And al-Sisi may be the beneficiary of U.S. influence to be the top guy in Egypt right now, which is he's repaying by helping the U.S. sell a second invasion of Libya to the American people. But he also knows that he is responsible for the future of Egypt, and that future may not be tangled up with the U.S. economy. Now, needless to say, the most recent talks about the Greek debt crisis have ended, with both sides maintaining their hardline positions. The euro took a hit. As it was announced, the talks had basically collapsed. And everybody's saying, okay, what happens next? Now, supposedly there is a deadline at the end of this month for Greece to come to some kind of an agreement with the ECB and the EU to stay in the EU. And I think Tsipras' whole card is the fact that he may be seriously looking at leaving the EU and aligning with Russia, because Russia's making a very attractive offer. Same thing that Russia did to Ukraine. It's going to be very, very difficult for the U.S. to sell the need to invade and conquer Greece. Get rid of their government. Put in another puppet here. Oh, my goodness, ISIS is in Athens. They're hiding in the Parthenon. They're drawing mustaches on all the statues of the Greek gods. Actually, they already have mustaches. But there was an interesting statement coming out of one of the Eurogroup negotiators, Yanis Varoufakis, and Deutsche Bank's George Saravelos, basically came out saying this has to happen next. And all of it, you read through it all and you understand the EU and the ECB, they're grasping at straws, trying to find something that's going to work. Because remember, the EU and the ECB are trapped. They can't cut Greece any slack on the debt, or every other member state of the European Union is going to demand the same. That's why they're maintaining the hardline attitude. You will go on making the payments your predecessors arranged. Greece can't do it. That's what it comes down to. We have the same situation here, where Wall Street and Washington, D.C. are living in this delusion that there's still vast amounts of money out here in the hinterland, and they just have to figure out the correct way to scam it or scare it out of us and all be well. No, there isn't. The whole goal of private central banking is to grab all of a nation's wealth and put it in their own pocket, and nobody planned what to do when they got close to succeeding, and the system starts to break down, and that's exactly what's going on. Now, there's another article over at ZeroHedge.com, Greece and Euroland's crumbling McMansion of debt, that draws very interesting parallels between what's going on in the EU today and what happened here in the United States of America back in 2007, 2008, leading to the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud. Everybody thinks that if you can borrow a bunch of money and buy a piece of property and then say, oh, the property is worth XYZ, that you're creating wealth out of thin air, and it doesn't really work that way. Because the worth of an asset is what you can get somebody else to pay for it. And when everybody's running out of money, you can say, I'm sitting in a house that's worth $4.5 million, and you're not going to be able to find anybody who can actually pay that. And this whole debt-based economic system is based on fraud and belief. It's not science. It is a religion. It's a set of arbitrary rules that serve the priesthood, in this case the money junkies, that we are all brainwashed to believe represents something real, so that we'll go on living our lives by the rules they've created out of thin air to take wealth from us and put it in their pocket here. Story over at Ex Republic TV. If Greece exits the Eurozone, the immediate question is going to be, who's next? And that's a valid question. Especially if Greece leaves the EU and life for them starts to improve immediately, that's going to be noticed by the other member states of the EU, where life is very difficult right now. Ever since the Syriza party won the Greek elections, the anti-austerity, anti-banker parties all across Europe are making gains. Spain, Italy, even in Germany, in the Hamburg city-state elections. Another story out of Investment Watch blog. Greek revolution woke up Europeans, spreads like wildfire. And that's exactly what's happening. The people of the world are waking up to this instrument of enslavement and servitude called private central banking. And they understand there are better ways to run a nation's economy for the nation and its people. And they don't want their entire nation and their population, certainly not their children, to be some part of a profit-making operation by these private central bankers for just ink and paper. They are waking up. And the money junkies are scared. Because these aren't people who know how to make good products. And I want to draw a big black line between these money junkie bankers who are scamming vast wealth from the people of planet Earth and people who get rich in what I would consider the ideals of capitalism. I don't have a problem with people who are rich. I get a lot of emails from the money junkies saying, oh, you just hate rich people. You don't think differently if you're rich yourself. Probably not, but I welcome the chance to find out. But we look at people like James Cameron or Steve Jobs or George Lucas, who became very wealthy by making something we voluntarily gave our money for. That is what capitalism is supposed to be. And we rightly look on such people with admiration and respect and say, that's what I want to be like. And we need to keep that group of wealthy people separate conceptually from the money junkie bankers, financial CEOs whose wealth is acquired without returning anything of value to our society. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, a little bit of good news out there. France has issued arrest warrants for ex-UBS managers that were helping the elite, the 1%, evade taxes. And I think at this stage of the game, anytime any banker gets arrested and tossed in the hoosegow for what they've been doing, we have to applaud, especially Iceland. They just threw another batch in prison here about a week ago. And you didn't hear about that on the American corporate media, did you? Now, over at HSBC, they're calling in all the spin doctors and PR firms to try and repair their image after the exposure that they've been running one of the largest money laundering operations on the planet that included celebrities, politicians, drug lords, terrorists. And so far, nobody at HSBC has been arrested. Nobody's looking at going to jail. Oh, my goodness. Bankers are above the law. The money junkies are sacrosanct. You cannot touch them. I remember a story we did about, I think it was a year ago, where this banker for J.P. Morgan did a hit and run in Los Angeles. Actually, it wasn't even a hit and run. Got into an accident, told the police he was late for a meeting at the bank, and the police let him go. Even congressmen don't get that kind of slack. Now, over in Great Britain, as the economy continues to suffer there, Prime Minister David Cameron, under the guise of teaching order and discipline to the young people of Great Britain, wants them to basically work for the government without any pay. And what they're basically doing is saying that anybody who wants to collect any government benefits will have to work for them, which sounds like a good idea until you realize that the amount of work they're doing versus the money they're getting is lower than minimum wage. And, of course, that's putting somebody else who would have been paid a regular salary out of work. Story out of Natural News. Global economy continues to wither as West Coast ports remain shut down. We're already seeing it here in Hawaii. Supply chain issues, gaps on the store shelves, things you can't get anymore. And we're not talking luxury discretionary items. We're talking essentials. Now, supposedly Obama's going to get involved in this. And in theory, what he's going to tell the union leaders is, look, right now, these shipping companies, these port facilities don't have the money to give you any raises or additional benefits. And hopefully the union leaders will realize that they can either go along with the economic reality, or they can basically destroy themselves and their workers. But behind it all is the fact that the Baltic Dry Index, as of today, was down to 516. It is continuing to drop. And it is dropping because ordinary consumers don't have money to go down to the shopping mall and buy anything. And so the shopping mall doesn't have any reason to order new manufactured goods from factories. And so those factories don't have a reason to order new raw materials. That's the domino. Remember, back before the crash of 2008, the consumer economy was 60% of the total U.S. economy. And that's just been destroyed by this looting of ordinary people by the money junkies who seem to be convinced that as long as the money is flipping around back and forth in their hands, that all will be well. But it isn't. Story out of, I'm not exactly sure. The link was corrupted. Home builder confidence dips in February. More and more kids coming out of college with those horrendous student loans can't find the high-paying jobs they were assured would be there to pay back that student loan. Still living with their parents. They're not going out and buying homes. We could be looking at another real estate crash in the very, very near future. Now, over in India, they've been in negotiations for the last 3 years to purchase from France 126 Rafale fighter jets. And the latest word is that deal is about to fall through because every time France comes back to talk about it, the price on the jets has gone up. Apparently, they bid the contract very low to get the contract, and then over time they're saying, well, it's really going to cost this. You know, we're putting in carpeting and chrome trim and a CD player, and all of these things cost money, especially under military procurement. But that deal may collapse. And remember, France is already looking at a major hit over that brouhaha of the Mistral ships that were bought and paid for by Russia, and France has now canceled delivery under pressure from the United States of America. Russia wants the ships or their money back, and that's a major, major hit. Now they're going to lose this contract over there in India as well. Now, you've probably seen this all over the web because a lot of people are talking about this. Apparently, down in Texas, a federal judge has issued a temporary stay on Obama's executive action on illegal immigration. The lawsuit was brought by 26 states. U.S. District Judge Andrew Hanen granted the preliminary injunction because this flood of illegal immigrants is causing harm to the country. It's exacerbating the unemployment problem. It has represented a threat to the health of the American people. And it was illegal for Obama to do that from his desk without Congress. So now there's a temporary restraining order, or actually an injunction. And of course, this is probably going to fast track it up to the Supreme Court, where I'm sure the NSA already has the dirt on all those judges to get whatever it is the NSA actually wants. We're going to start a phone call here, but Al in Canada, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break into the next segment, but go ahead and start now.
Hi, how are you, Mike?
Fine.
I'm phoning about the Bank of Canada lawsuit here in Canada.
Yes.
I've contacted my MP. I live in Hamilton East. It's southern Ontario. The email I sent him, actually some of the information came directly from your website. One of them was the West Coast News, which was down for about a week or so. Another one was a YouTube video. And then, of course, I put in another video, a YouTube video concerning a retired school teacher named Bill Abram. And he talks about
Al, just sit right there on that thought. We're going to be gone for 4 minutes, and I'm going to come right back to you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Al in Canada about the Comer lawsuit against the Canadian government and the Bank of Canada. And for those of you who are a little late coming to this story, let me do a brief recap. What we basically have here is the Bank of Canada, unlike banks in many other nations, is owned by the people of Canada. And as part of its charter, it is supposed to provide interest-free loans to the Canadian government for infrastructure development. But, very quietly, starting in 1974, the Canadian government started going to private banks to borrow that money at interest, forcing the Canadian taxpayers to pay huge amounts of money for that interest that they really should not have to do so. Now, this lawsuit has been working its way through the courts, and it's reached the Canadian Supreme Court, and all of the court decisions have said, yeah, absolutely, this is what's supposed to be going on. And the government of Canada has ordered a media blackout on this story. I'm getting emails from a lot of people in Canada saying when I post links about this story, they're blocked in Canada. Because from the point of view of the Canadian government, they can't answer this question about why, if the Bank of Canada is supposed to provide interest-free loans for infrastructure development, are you borrowing that money at interest from bankers? Because the only answer they've actually got is, well, those private bankers write very generous campaign donations, and that's obviously not going to go down very well with the Canadian people. So they're trying to keep a lid on this story. We actually have the same situation here in the United States. The Constitution authorizes the federal government to create and issue interest-free money. So why is our government borrowing that money at interest from a privately owned central bank, thereby saddling the American people with billions of dollars in interest payments they shouldn't have to pay? Well, it's because the private central bank writes very generous campaign donations every election season. That's what's going on. This is a question being asked by people that governments simply can't answer. They can't rationalize or justify what they've been doing. All right, so Al, please pick up where you left off.
Yeah, so, basically you covered everything, Mike.
Yep.
Also, I'd like to point out just the interest alone since 1974 on this illegal Canadian government debt it amounts to over $1.2 trillion. That is an astronomical figure. It amounts to about $35,000 for every man, woman, and child living in Canada now. And I can just imagine, what it has been like for Americans all this time for the last 100 years. I mean, the ladies I talked to, as I, moved up the ladder through the government, had no idea that this was going on, which I find appalling. They're working for the government. So anyway, just to recap, and then I'll let you go. The last email I sent was to Nathan Cohen. He is the finance critic for the official opposition, and it's NDP. Not an NDP guy, but hey, any Canadians out there, by all means, get a hold of this person here, and let's straighten this out. I appreciate your time, Mike. I wish you and Claire all the best. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And obviously also for all of our Canadian listeners, because there is a government-mandated blackout on this story, the burden falls on you to track down this story anywhere you can, print it out on paper so it can't be deleted off the cloud, and start showing it to all your friends and neighbors. And simply say, this little scam by the Canadian central government has cost every Canadian $35,000 they should never have had to pay.
No.
And
no,
you got to get the word out.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Yeah, it is. It's a scam. Government's on the side of the bankers. That's fascism. We have the same situation here in the U.S. The government is allowed to issue their own debt-free currency. That's in the Constitution, and that has never been repealed. And our government instead borrows money from the Federal Reserve. Where does the Federal Reserve get it? They print it out of thin air. They type it into a computer. It doesn't represent anything real. And Wall Street continues to give very generous campaign donations to politicians who will perpetuate the current system. Now, since Vietnam, if all the taxes collected from the American people to pay down the national debt had been paying down the principal, the national debt would be paid off right now. But the system is deliberately set up so that you are making payments on the interest only to make it permanent. You're getting suckered. Your children will get suckered. Your grandchildren will get suckered. It is a modern form of enslavement. It is ruled by banker interest. And it's no more a legitimate form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And like those past systems, it only works as long as the people are brainwashed into believing this is the way the world is supposed to be. And it's time for all of us to become banker heretics, to restore the public currency to being a public utility instead of a privatized for-profit operation for the money junkies. Anyway, getting on back to the immigration issue and the federal judge who's issued a temporary injunction against implementing of Obama's latest unconstitutional executive order, we're looking at a potential shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security at the end of the month because their funding has not been through Congress over this illegal immigration issue. And in theory, they're looking at some 15% of the workforce being let go. And personally, I hope it's that 15% of the workforce that grabs your crotches at the airport, takes things out of your luggage that don't really belong to them, and for the exceptionally clumsy members of the TSA, drops and destroys very expensive high-end laptops. And Congress is acting decisively to deal with this crisis. Apparently, they're taking this week off. Now, we have been reporting on this commission taking place down in Australia, the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse in Melbourne. And they've had the victims come forward, and apparently this is tangled up with a lot of the Jewish schools and institutions down there, and just like the Catholics, they tried to cover it up. Australia's top rabbi has had to step down now because of the scandal, and I'm sure Pope Francis is breathing a sigh of relief that the Catholics are now not the only ones seen as child sexual predators in the world of the God biz. And now, advocates are saying it is time for a global investigation into religious sexual abuse of children. And I'm fully on board of that. Because you can't stand up there at the front of the church in a bunch of robes, holding a collection plate, claiming to be the voice of the supreme moral authority of the universe, and behave like this when people aren't looking. Now, over in Great Britain, they've got another child abuse scandal they are dealing with. There are apparently some very sick people drawn to positions of power and authority here. And apparently there is a new scandal emerging over the Kincora Children's Home in Northern Ireland, where there was abuse going on there. And apparently the police stopped their investigation. And wait till you find out why. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And boy, I must have said something that got somebody upset because the BAM user feed is being interrupted and my website server is being DOS'd at the same time. And apparently BAM user, the people who are watching the show on BAM user are saying that all of a sudden they're getting this pop-up, why do you think this show is inappropriate? So it looks like somebody's trying to get in there and cause mischief and trouble, which is basically a confession that they know they can't win the debate on its merits, on the logic, on the law, on the facts. So they have to play dirty. They think playing dirty is their divine right. It gets them what they want. The money and the power and anything we do to those mere mortals is justified because it brings us more wealth and power and money. So, we're talking about this scandal coming out of the Kincora Children's Home in Northern Ireland. And it's part of a larger scandal looking into this pedophilia problem that they seem to have with the elites in Great Britain. And I'm amazed at the scale of it, but then I was amazed when the Franklin scandal broke here in the United States of America, where all these people with that kind of money and power seem to think, hey, it's okay, you know, we can diddle the little kiddies. We're allowed to do that because we're special. And apparently the scandal coming on out now is that the police investigation into the Kincora Children's Home was abruptly cut off And everybody was wondering what was going on. And apparently, information has surfaced at the High Court that's investigating this whole thing that MI5 halted the police investigation because apparently they had an intelligence gathering operation at Kincora to get videos of important people having sex with little kiddies with which to blackmail them. Now, boy, this is a far cry from our image of British intelligence where Bond, James Bond, and he's always suave and debonair and he's always the good guy. We have these British spies who were perfectly okay letting little children continue to be sexually molested so they could gather information with which to blackmail the molesters. That's sick. That is a little sick. And apparently the High Court agrees, and they're now going after MI5 to try and find out just how sick these people really are. Okay. Now, let's get on to the NSA, because this latest scandal is just going all over the globe. This is no longer just being reported here on the independent media. We're seeing it in places like the CBC up in Canada, how the NSA hid spying software right inside the hard drives, the firmware that comes from the factory. Western Digital, Seagate, Toshiba, other manufacturers are all caught up in this, because obviously this sort of thing cannot happen without the permission of the management of Western Digital, Seagate, Toshiba, and so forth. Now, Kaspersky says that they have found there was a bias in the targeting. Most of the infections that were exploiting this built-in backdoor in the physical hard drives were targeting Iran, followed by Russia, not surprising there, Pakistan, then Afghanistan, China, Mali, I don't know why Mali, Syria, Yemen, and Algeria. The targets included government and military institutions, telecommunications companies, banks, keep that one in mind, energy companies, nuclear researchers, media, and, of course, those Islamic activists. Another story, this is out of Investment Watch blog. NSA Trojan firmware, widespread. U.S. international tech reputation may suffer. Gee, you think? Because of the Snowden leaks, America's computer, software, and services industry has already taken a major hit. People don't want to plug into computer networks that go through American servers. They don't want the American cloud. They don't want to buy computers that are resold through American companies, because we all know they're manufactured over in Asia. The United States can't manufacture a computer. They contract it out. So around the rest of the world, they're setting up other companies to go to Asia and manufacture computers that are a little bit more private, and they're going to sell those in their stores. Computers and computer services was one of the few areas of the U.S. economy that wasn't as much in decline as things like our automobile industry. And now the NSA has just driven a stake through the heart of what's left of that industry. Story out of Patriot Rising. NSA braces for news leak of its cyber surveillance work. Oh, it's a public relations problem. We have to convince all Americans that if we don't have hardware backdoors in their computer equipment, that the terrorists will win. Well, I want to point something out here. Bill of Rights, Fifth Amendment. When you read past the part about you're not being forced to testify against yourself, it says down at the bottom, no person's property will be taken for government use without just compensation. The NSA is using your computer hardware that you bought and paid for. They're using your internet connection you pay monthly for. They're using your electricity you're paying for monthly. The NSA is not only violating the Fourth Amendment, they're violating the Fifth Amendment and the Ninth and the Tenth. They're batting 400 right now. Let's see, over at Oras.com, NSA has figured out how to hide spying software deep within hard drives. And by the way, there's no way to get it out. I mean, it's in the firmware. The only way you can get it out is to physically destroy the hard drive. And then, of course, you need a new hard drive. Where are you going to go? Anybody make a hard drive that isn't compromised? Probably not. They could really send the entire world back into a new dark ages, because people are already giving up computers and going back to typewriters because they don't want to be spied on by all this stuff here. And coupled with that, of course, is the revelation that some of the world's worst hackers are now linked to the NSA. Remember the other day we were joking about, why doesn't the NSA catch all these cyber criminals and hackers that are stealing billions of dollars and compromising all the credit card information? Why can't they do it? Maybe they're doing it. There is now evidence to suggest this is exactly what's going on. The vast majority of the computer crime taking place on Earth today is coming from the NSA. To make money, to build a case for cybersecurity. And apparently the NSA has been doing this since 2001 and accelerated in 2008 when Obama came to power. So apparently Obama said, hey, this is a good idea. Go on doing it here. Another story out of 12160. NSA's X-Keyscore program allows access to emails and chats without a warrant. Completely illegal, completely unconstitutional. The mere existence of the NSA committing these crimes delegitimizes the entire U.S. federal government. Because they bought and paid for all of this. They spent your money to spy on you. They're using your property for their purposes without just compensation. Article out of secularist.com basically showing that code examination, a new form of forensics, has shown clear links between the NSA and Stuxnet and a hacker group called Fanny. They're the cyber criminals. They're the ones breaking into computers. They're the ones who looted $1 billion out of the banking system. They're completely out of control and answerable to nobody. So, another story here at arstechnica.com, how omnipotent hackers tied to the NSA hid for 14 years. Well, now we know that they're there. It's called the Equation Group. That's not what they call themselves. We don't know what they call themselves. But that's the name given to them by Kaspersky because of their heavy reliance on intense math-based encryption. We'll be right back after the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. We're talking about the latest revelation of U.S. government skullduggery for all law-abiding computer users around the globe. A huge revelation that apparently, with the blessing and cooperation of the top management of hard drive manufacturers around the world, the U.S. government actually modified the firmware on the hard drives to put in back doors so that it doesn't matter what software locks you put on your computer, what protective measures you took, they could go right on in through the backplane, right to the hard drive, and get whatever they wanted on you. Without a warrant, I might add. Completely in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And coupled with that are revelations coming out that analysis of malware like Stuxnet are showing links with other malware known to be used by cyber criminals and hackers, specifically a group called the Equation Group, that have attacked at least 42 countries. Iran, Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so forth and so on. Now, malware is classed in various categories. Hobby level, kid with a, script on his machine in his parents' basement is at the lowest. And it goes up through professional cyber criminal, and just above that is nation state. And Kaspersky was noticing that the cybercriminal malware and the nation-state malware seem to have common roots. And so this equation group has been operating for about 14 years. NSA couldn't find them. We're not looking for the bad people, said the head of the NSA. Now we find out they are the bad people. Now here's an article out of Russia Today that really lays open what's going on here. Criminally insane irresponsibility has led to a modern hacker's paradise, and it's something we have been saying for years now. Every time the NSA puts a backdoor into your computer, the real criminals will find it and use it. Far from making the nation more secure, the NSA's skullduggery has made our computer infrastructure wide open. It's weak because of all the holes burrowed through it by the NSA. And so now Obama says, well, we need more cybersecurity, and that means more taxes and more bureaucracy and everything. You could restore cybersecurity by shutting down the NSA. Look at the damage they have caused to ordinary citizens whose personal information is stolen going through these installed back doors. Look how much damage the NSA has caused America's computer industries and software companies. And for all of that, NSA still cannot find real criminals or real terrorists who write their own encryption. Total waste of money, violation of the Constitution, delegitimizes the U.S. government in entirety, crippling America's computer industries. And for what? Now, Obama has responded to all of this by saying that the nations that are raising a big stink about the NSA spying, oh, well, they're just criticizing America's computer industries and tech industries because they just can't compete with us. Well, Obama, we don't really have a computer tech industry. We have a tech reselling industry because all that tech is actually built in other countries, remember? And so now Obama is out there calling for a public debate on encryption. And what that means is, once again, the government is going to try and mandate what encryption you can use. Meaning it will be encryption that the NSA already knows the method to or has backdoored and can break into. Now, I reposted a link to my article on Rivero Challenges the NSA, where I had these 6 encryption challenges I put out there, not one of which was ever solved. And I included the source code. It's in the public domain for educational purposes. And down at the bottom, during the first challenge, we go into the history of encryption in the United States, where the government has come out and said everybody must use the standard encryption approved by the government so that we can spy on you. We talked about the data encryption standard, DES, which even when it came out, computer security experts were saying this is deliberately weakened by limiting the key length. It's insecure. And then it was discovered that one of the packets in the encrypted file header included your encryption key, re-encrypted in another key that presumably the NSA had. They didn't even have to worry about brute forcing your message. Your message included the key to decrypt it for the NSA. Then they tried Clipper chip. They tried to sell to the American people saying, well, it's a strong encryption system and the keys will be in the possession of the government, but they'll be broken in 2 and each half of the key will be in a different escrow system, so without the proper paperwork they can't get the 2 keys and put them back together. The part they didn't tell you is that NSA only needs 1/2 of the key to derive the second half. And the other part they didn't tell you was another little packet in the encrypted message called the Law Enforcement Assistance Field, or LEAF, which again contained your encryption key for their use and their convenience. And so Obama is now calling for a public debate on encryption, and what the government's position is going to be, nobody should be allowed to use encryption that we can't break because we're the government and we're the good guys, and we have a right to peek into everything that you're doing. Or the terrorists will win. But we already know that these government goons peeking into your systems are not fighting terror and they're not fighting crime, they're committing crimes. Where they're stealing your business secrets, your plans for a new product, your new invention, and handing it off to cronies to get to market before you do. They were caught red-handed doing that up at the Asia-Pacific Economic Conference in Seattle a few years back. The NSA exists to loot law-abiding Americans of their business secrets, of their personal information, of blackmail material, pictures of your boyfriend or girlfriend in the nude so they can drool over it. Snowden came out and said, yeah, they hand around porn, the free porn taken off of people's personal computers. They think it's just jolly good fun. You have a right to privacy. It's there in that Fourth Amendment. You have a right to privacy from the government until the government demonstrates you are actually committing a crime. And then, and only then, with the proper warrant, can they look at your files. You have a right to privacy, and if the government will not respect that right to privacy, you have every right to take steps to protect your data, to protect your new product, to protect your new cookie recipe, so that you get to make a business out of it and not some boyfriend or girlfriend of somebody over at the NSA. You do have a right to privacy, and the government does not have the authority to rescind that, because that Constitution and the Bill of Rights does not belong to the federal government. It belongs to we, the people. And we have to take it back. We'll be right back after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And following on the whole NSA story, we're still getting more and more reports that Microsoft's latest patches are actually causing a lot more damage than the security holes they purport to fix, which is a joke because the security holes are all there by the NSA, and Microsoft wants you to believe your machines are safe to trust your private data on, and no, they are not. And frankly, if you are in a position of needing to secure your private data, you probably ought to think about going down to the used computer store and buy an old laptop or something that doesn't even have Wi-Fi in it. Keep your data on that. I have an old machine without Wi-Fi that I do my encryption development on. It's leftover production machine from way back on Lost. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Scott in Utah, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Good show as usual. Hey, just wanted to, I watched the UN thing today. It was predictable as usual. Everybody slings mud at each other. Hey, look, we're in a proxy war here. I mean, let's kind of factor out Europe and Ukraine and everybody else. This is the United States against Europe. Russia.
Yeah,
sorry.
And China. Don't forget, they're going to pivot to China because the real war is between the U.S. dollar, the ruble, and the yuan.
Yeah, well, yes, you're correct. But, it was astounding today. I've been watching the UN briefings or Security Council for the last year. And I mean, this is look. Why doesn't both of us put on the gloves and go after it? Because this proxy war stuff is getting old, and people are getting killed in the middle.
Yeah, well, people always get killed in the middle in the proxy wars, and they don't count. They're just in the way of the money junkies, and they're either going to be useful combatants or they're just they're just in the way.
Hey, and also, Poroshenko, him and his ministers are leaving the country, and I guess the thing that I put up there was the Dunkirk moment during the Second World War when England and or the United Kingdom thought they were going to come in and save everybody, and France and everybody, and then they got their butts handed to them, and then they had to go to Calais and get boats over on the other side. Now with Poroshenko and his gang leaving.
I need to correct you here, because Poroshenko and the parliament members and the deputies are still there. It is their families that have been evacuated. Now, it does seem to suggest a bug out might be imminent, but as of the last report I have, Poroshenko and the parliament and the deputies are pretty much still there in Kiev. It's their wives and children and boyfriends and girlfriends who've been asked to get out, and it did involve apparently at least some chartered aircraft to do it.
Michael, I stand corrected. I didn't mean that Poroshenko and his ministers left, but they are evidently seeing the writing on the wall. And I wonder where Yatsenuk is, where this guy is. Has he left the country as well, or does he have his family out of there?
I don't have specifics.
It seems like, Dobas, I can't even say that word, the cauldron down there.
Yes.
It seems like if they lose that cauldron, basically, they're going to admit defeat. Okay? And that railroad hub there goes everywhere in that country. And if they get that strategic, transportation hub, they can go anywhere in that country, okay? And that means, look, if Russia's providing arms, fine. If we're providing arms, fine. But if they get that, they can go everywhere in that country very easily, unless it's bombed. But it's, I don't know. Look, I just wanted to call in and say thank you for everything you do. It's been a few years since I've called in. I'm a sourdough. I'm sour on Utah. I have no dough to leave. And hopefully this thing will resolve itself without Emerald Blast.
Well, I would certainly hope that to be the case, but again, the Russian Federal Police have uncovered another one of these U.S. attempts to kick up riots in Crimea, to break it loose from Russia, bring it back to the EU. Obviously, Poroshenko is not going to be able to resolve the situation in eastern Ukraine within the week deadline that he has reportedly been given by his own military. If Poroshenko can't get the eastern Ukraine and what remains of its industry that hasn't been bombed into rubble, he can't pay all the loans that were given to him to fight this. So he's lost the war. He's lost the war.
The West has a big problem with this, the Svoboda Party and the right sector. I read an article today that the Russians intercepted a cache of, weapon supplies that were in Crimea.
Yes.
For riots and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Things are going to get out of control, I think, Mike.
I think they're already out of control. Remember, this whole war to re-dollarize the planet was supposed to be over in 2008 with the conquest of Iran. And so it's already out of control. And I don't think anybody went in there to Kiev a year ago to overthrow that elected government thinking that it was going to turn into a civil war the way it has. The U.S. has done this covert overthrow model since the end of World War II, and up until recently, when they'd replaced the government, the people of that nation would just obediently go along with their new shepherds. But the Ukrainian people have broken that model. And that's why the U.S. is really afraid, because if Ukraine throws off this U.S. puppet government, it's setting a new precedent, because under the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all people have a right to self-determination. If the government over in Washington, D.C. isn't working for us, we have a right under the UN Charter to break away and form a new country on our own, which is exactly what the Eastern Ukraine republics have tried to do.
Yes, absolutely. And back to the bankers, like I said, I'm a sourdough. I'm sour on Utah, and I have no dough to leave. This is a product of the banks. But look, I don't know.
Okay,
look,
we're coming up here on.
I'm going to continue listening to you, Mike. Michael, because everything that you're saying makes sense. I haven't called in for 3 years now, and I just want to let you know that you're right on the point. And tonight, specifically because of the UN Security Council meeting, this resolution where the Russians had a
Scott, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm looking over at CBS News, and they're proclaiming that over in Germany they've found another surviving Nazi guard. He's 93 years old, and they're charging him for the crime of being a guard. And if they're wagging Nazis at us again, then Israel's about to do something really tacky. Because it's almost become a ritual. Every time Israel's going to bomb some other country, invade some other country, assassinate somebody, they announce it ahead of time by wagging Nazis all over the corporate media. Nazi, 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 Nazi. It's really, really very obvious. All right, now then. Human-caused global warming. Remember last year we were talking about how Niagara Falls froze solid? It's happened again. We have the article linked to whatreallyhappened.com. You've got to look at the pictures. They're amazing. Amazing. Niagara Falls has frozen solid in this winter. Article over at animalnewyork.com describing New York Harbor looking like the Arctic Ocean. There's ice all over the place. Now, it's thin. The ships can get through it. And they're talking about setting a cold temperature record. But don't worry, there's one day they've got a record that's a little bit colder back in 1888. Now, the storms that just hit New England are moving west across the U.S. and causing a lot of mayhem. Snowstorm paralyzes central U.S. as New York cold hits record low. Apparently it was so cold they had to close federal offices in Washington, D.C., which is a good thing because if the offices are closed, they can't do any more mischief, can they? Apparently 243,000 Americans are without power in 13 states and Washington, D.C. So far, blizzard mania, they're calling it, has resulted in $1 billion of losses. And I'm sure Wall Street is going to be quick to use the blizzards as an excuse for the faltering economy. We were doing great. We had the economy on the verge of turning around, but gosh darn it, all that snow and ice came in, which you're supposed to forget about next summer when we're out there selling you carbon credits here. Tri-state area braces for possibility of record cold. Record cold grips Michigan. It's all over the place here. Polar vortex to deliver another brutal shot of record cold to Michigan later this week. It's not over. Spring is about, 2.5 weeks away? February is the snowiest month, the snowiest February for Boston since they began keeping records, and the month is only half over. Cold wave overnight includes record 12 below zero in Cleveland, 23 below in Ashtabula County. Now, over in New Hampshire, we have this mountain, Mount Washington, and they have a weather station up on the top, and it is brutal up there. Right now, Mount Washington is the second coldest place on the planet. The only place with a recording station that's colder is the South Pole. Amazing here. And the Carbonazis are not giving up. Over at USA Today, you're not going to believe this. This is real. This is not satire. USA Today is out there with a headline, nationally, it's been one of the warmest winters on record. And they're saying, yes, there has been record cold in a few little tiny isolated places. But this is one of the warmest winters ever, according to the National Climatic Data Center. Now, apparently, nobody over at the USA Today got word about how the British media found that the National Climatic Data Center was cooking the books. where the raw data was showing cooling, and somehow, after it got out of the NCDC, it was supporting the screams about global warming. So they are. When the spring melt finally happens, the carbon Nazis are going to be back saying global warming, global warming, global warming, carbon tax, carbon tax, carbon tax. Forget all about that snow and ice you saw. It was just around you, and every place else around was a warm tropical paradise. It's even been unusually cold here in Hawaii, speaking of warm tropical paradise, which I don't mind because Claire snuggles up closer to me at night for body heat. Another article out of Aletho News, Climate Science, Consensus, or Conformity, and it's a personal story about somebody who was in climate science where unless he wrote and supported the global warming agenda, he was denied publication, denied advancement, threatened with his degree. That's not science, that's tyranny, that's dictatorship. Finally, another article over here in judithcurry.com. How do we know the climate we're going to is going to be worse as opposed to better? There's really no foundation for that. Climate change does happen. And life adapts. All righty, let's see. We're going to grab some phone calls here. We got 3 calls waiting to get to the top of the show, and we're going to talk to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Been a long time, been on the phone.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I was sitting there listening on the Neocon Local Talk Radio show. They're sitting there and going, and a poll read, Fox or CNN poll, 75% of Americans want boots on the ground in the Middle East to beat ISIS. And Mike, I don't really have a hard time believing that because I don't really think the families want to go through the stress of deployment and, you know, and our boys coming back.
Well, you know, my response to that is find everybody who said I want boots on the ground in the Middle East and give them an M16 and a parachute right now. But we know those corporate media polls are being rigged. They don't measure public opinion. They are intended to manufacture it, relying on the herd instinct. That if you are told that most of your neighbors want to rub blue mud into your navel, that you will rush right down to the store and buy your own jar of blue mud. That's what they're doing.
Because, you know, it's just this ISIS thing. It's just like you said, it's just a propaganda ploy.
Of course it's a propaganda ploy. It's all propaganda. This government doesn't dare tell any American the real reason for this war, because no parent is going to send off their son or daughter to be killed and crippled to make already wealthy bankers a little bit richer than they are right now.
Well, right now I see that, and you know the thing is, I notice a lot of people are not talking about is like with these derivatives. You know, they're saying, oh, the derivatives bubble. People don't realize this derivative bubble crashes, and you know the thing, and the people says we're not paying for your bad mistakes on these derivatives. You know, you can send these bankers to the poorhouse.
Well, they'll just print up all kinds of money to cover their losses, and they'll inflate the value of the dollar away, and we'll be in Weimar Republic territory. And it will all be declared a debt that our great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren are obliged to pay off. We're going to have to stand up to these bankers and poke them a good one in the nose and say no more.
Exactly. It's just, but you know, it's like these wars and all this. Like I said, I just don't really see, you know, it's more like with Ukraine. Like I say, I don't see the American military willing to go in, and the only thing you do is find mercenaries to go in. Because you ain't going to find nobody in the U.S. military willing to go to war with Russia.
Well, I mean, they're not finding anybody who wants to go to war in America, period. There was even an article out there about how the Army Reserve is now being forced to accept people that normally they wouldn't accept because of drug problems, obesity, health issues. But, you know, anybody that shows up, they'll put them in a uniform now. I could even probably qualify. All right, George, got to let you go here. We got to take a break for commercials. We got 2 more callers waiting on the line we're going to get to as soon as we come back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today, and before we hit the phone lines, I've got a brief public service announcement here. If you were planning on attending the global warming protest at Yale University, it has been canceled because of the cold weather. That's not a joke. They were going to have a global warming protest, and they had to cancel it because of the snow and ice. All righty, we're going to go back to the phones here. Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Geez, I almost forgot my question. I was laughing so hard at that last little response there about the global warming. That was great.
Yes.
No. Hey, I got a neighbor who lived in Greece. He's moved here. He's been here in the States probably about 10 years now. So we've been debating this whole Greece thing. And I guess my question to you is, I have a theory and solution set, but what would you do to solve this issue, this problem, this currency problem, this debt problem?
Well, if I were the government of Greece, I would leave the EU. I would simply say we're not paying at least that portion of the debt created through fraud, and I would probably align much closer with the BRICS nations. So, that's what I would do. Of course, I'm looking at it from the point of view of the Greek people. From the point of view of the European Union and the ECB, they're stuck. They really don't have any options. They cannot cut Greece any significant slack on the debt without getting immediate demands from every other EU nation to do exactly the same. And so they're in a corner, and they really don't have any place to move.
Does Greece have any laws pertaining to odious debt? At all, any laws on that?
Odious debt is a recognized principle in international law. And I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. I think it's it may even reside in maritime law, which is considered jus gentium, where it applies everywhere. But it is a principle. It has been used before, where governments will fall and the citizens will simply walk away from debts that were incurred for purposes other than the care of the nation and its infrastructure.
Okay, one last question. If there is a bailout, which I assume there will be a bailout for Greece, what's not to stop the domino effect for other countries with debt to say, hey, what about us? And then what also, if you bail them out, just look at the same bailouts we did with our companies here in the United States banking industry, of how nothing ever really happened. The people who caused the problem were never penalized. They never went to jail. And then those who caused the problem in Greece simply kind of come back into the country again once the money's there.
Well, first of all, you need to understand a bailout is not a gift. It's just another loan. It's another credit card for them to move their old credit card balances onto. And you're absolutely right. All the bailouts in the United States of Wall Street, which were charged to the taxpayer, did not change the behavior of Wall Street, because Wall Street was not forced to pay the costs of their bad behavior. And so, yeah, they went right on doing the same thing again, and we're back on the edge of another major crash here. And the same thing applies in Greece. These bailouts are not gifts. And, of course, the European Union ECB position for Greece is they'll gladly give them another loan, but only if they agree to pay the past loans on the current terms and payments. And Greece just doesn't have the money to do that. And so, in many ways, Tsipras is also in a corner. They can't agree to the EU conditions because that's why Syriza is in power. The Greek people just don't have it, because like every other private central bank, the ECB creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt. And what the ECB has been doing all across Europe for the last several years is trying to sort of balance the debt by shifting it around so that everybody stays just below the level of default. But they can't keep doing that forever. And the total aggregate debt in Europe is now pushed all of them to the edge of default.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Last phone call for today. We're going to go to Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I just saw on CNN that they say that ISIS is getting ready for a new major offensive in Iraq. And
really? How did they know that?
Right, exactly. Well, here's the thing. They took over that one town that's not too terribly far from where the town where the area where there's several hundred Marines are placed. And I'm thinking it's entirely possible with all Supla trying to get this war authorization and get these polls about how many people favor boots on the ground. Why aren't we hearing about reinforcements going in to back up those several hundred Marines? Are they going to leave them as lambs to the slaughter to be overrun so that they can scream and cry and say, war, war, we need to send them in? Why are we not seeing that location, that emplacement, strengthened and reinforced in anticipation of this onslaught?
For this exact same reason that Roosevelt sent all the modern aircraft carriers and escorts out of Pearl Harbor on December 6th, 1941. You're absolutely right. the U.S. government would not hesitate to sacrifice hundreds or even thousands of people in a bloody event that could be blamed on the designated enemy. They're desperate to get this thing going. They're desperate for war with Russia, China, or the Middle East to keep their little agenda going. And the rest of the world has just picked up on, ISIS is as phony as Al-Qaeda was. And they're out there they're escalating it with more and more burnings and beheadings and everything. And they've burned everybody out. We've seen that already. Yeah, they're burning. We've seen that already. But the U.S. has been burning people alive with drone strikes for years now.
Right. Yeah, ISIS, the Israeli Special Insurgency Services.
That's just a coincidence. Yeah. I really didn't put that much in there. I'm not saying that Mossad isn't involved in ISIS, because every time ISIS is near the Israeli border, have you noticed they don't shoot at each other?
Right.
Okay.
Right. I think it has to do with them and Saudi cooperation. But it looks like they're getting ready to just let ISIS overrun this Marine emplacement. So.
All right. You're right. Could very well be. And, for those families of those Marines who are there, you have my deepest sympathies, but we have plenty of examples of the U.S. government willingly allowing U.S. forces to be killed for propaganda value, whether it was Pearl Harbor, the Marine barracks in Beirut, the crew of the USS Maine. It does happen. It is a common feature in U.S. history. And they're desperate to find something that they can get the American people to support a third invasion of Iraq, a second invasion of Libya, a new full-on invasion of Syria. Now that Yemen has broken away, I'm sure we're going to hear that ISIS is in Yemen. We've got to go in there. Apparently, Italy is out there saying, we're afraid that ISIS is going to attack us from Libya all the way across the Mediterranean. So they're mobilizing 6,000 troops to go into Libya to give ISIS what for. And this has got nothing to do with ISIS. This has to do with the people of Libya kicking out their U.S. puppet government and their mandated private central bank and wanting to run their country for their own benefit. And that cannot be allowed to stand under the New World Order. And that's exactly what this is all about. Glenn, thank you for the phone call. I'm going to let you go here. We're coming up on the top of the show. The European Court of Human Rights has confirmed its judgment that Poland actively assisted the CIA's torture program on their national territory. And the case basically came about an individual, Abu Zabadai, who is now at Guantanamo Bay, was tortured for years by the CIA. The CIA concluded he was not a member of Al-Qaeda, but because they don't want the world to see the scars on his body, he's now down at Guantanamo Bay, never to be seen again. Oh, boy. Apparently the ATF is going to reclassify .223 ammunition as an armor-piercing round so they can ban its importation and sale. The .223, of course, is the standard round used by the AR-15. And they don't like the fact that Americans have AR-15s and are beginning to build their own with the 80% kits. The .223 really doesn't qualify as an armor-piercing round. 50 caliber, yeah. .223, it's a glorified .22, is really what it is. But they're trying to just bend the rules to infringe on that which is supposed to be not infringed, our right to keep and bear arms. Is it obvious how afraid they are of you? They absolutely do not want you to have any kind of military weapons. At the same time, they're spending your tax dollars to give these weapons to Mexican drug cartels. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get some animation work done. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, stay angry, make good choices. Share what you know with who you know, especially up in Canada with the Comer lawsuit. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.